What's a zero-day attack? A diagram of the vulnerability timeline. Hi everyone, Leo Notenboom here for askleo.com. Question: can you tell me more about zero-day attacks? I experienced one on my fully updated and patched Windows computer. Automatic Windows updates were on, which has the latest anti-malware tools. I saw the hacked behavior and I immediately turned off my computer. Scanning both before and after this attack showed no prior or present malware infection. Is this the best response for such attacks, as it appears to have successfully prevented malware infection by this attack that I experienced? The very nature of zero-day exploits is that your malware scanner would show that you were clean both before and after being infected. It's not until your security software provider updates their databases and you take that update that your malware scanner even knows what to look for. And yeah, that means you may still be infected. Let's go through the timeline that got you here. A security vulnerability is a bug in software that could be hacked to compromise the system. There are undiscovered security vulnerabilities in Windows and in all operating systems. That's just a fact of software development, particularly for systems as large and as complex as operating systems. If no one knows about them, well, they're not an immediate threat. Malware creators obviously are going to exploit vulnerabilities that they don't know about. Who discovers the vulnerability first? That is very important. When the good guys discover a vulnerability, they often keep it a secret so that malware authors don't learn about it and don't try to exploit it. Instead, they contact Microsoft or the creator of software that has the vulnerability privately, informing them of the issue so that a fix can be distributed before the vulnerability becomes general knowledge. Sometimes they indicate that details will be made public after a certain amount of time. That's intended as an incentive for, say, Microsoft to resolve the issue. For example, they might give Microsoft 90 days to release a fix. After that, the nature and the details of the vulnerability might be published publicly. Now, if a malware author or hacker discovers the vulnerability first, they also try to keep it a secret so that Microsoft doesn't learn about it and fix it. Instead, they release malware exploiting the vulnerability so that they can infect systems before anybody knows about the issue. A zero-day vulnerability means that it was discovered in the wild before a fix was available. Microsoft has 0 days to fix the problem because it's already out there. When this happens, security software vendors scramble to make sure that their scanners recognize and block the malware exploiting the vulnerability, and hopefully Microsoft scrambles to then fix the problem. Let's look at that timeline just a little bit more closely. There are several stages. Vulnerability introduced. Almost all vulnerabilities are born of a simple programming error or oversight. Amazingly, it's often something that could have happened, years ago. If no one knows about it, no one knows to exploit it, and no one knows it needs to be fixed, so it remains completely benign. Vulnerability discovered by the hackers. Once discovered, the race is on. Hackers try to keep it to themselves for as long as possible so as to delay any fix. This begins what I call the window of complete vulnerability. There's a vulnerability, there is malware exploiting that the security software doesn't yet detect, and there is no fix. Other than making sure to practice safe computing, there's really little you can do about this. Now, malware exploiting the vulnerability being discovered. At some point, the existence of the problem becomes public knowledge, usually when somewhere finds and reverse engineers malware that's been exploiting this vulnerability. Anti-malware detection updated. As new malware is discovered, of course, anti-malware tool vendors add information to their databases so that the program can detect it. That's why it's so critical to keep your anti-malware databases as up-to-date as possible. Without the latest updates, your scanners won't know to detect the latest threats. This begins what I'm going to call the period of partial vulnerability. The malware can now be detected and blocked by anti-malware tools. This is really only partial safety, though, because the vulnerability in the operating system has not yet been fixed. New malware will be written making use of the same vulnerability as they attempt to stay one step ahead of the anti-malware vendors. Vulnerability fixed. At some point, Microsoft will release a patch fixing the underlying problem and remove the vulnerability. Systems that take the update are now safe from that particular vulnerability. Malware attempting to exploit that vulnerability on those systems will fail. This is why it's important to make sure your operating system is updated regularly. It's a race. In the best-case scenario, Microsoft has time to release a patch to prevent a vulnerability from it being exploited. In zero-day attacks, unfortunately, that vulnerability has already been maliciously exploited before Microsoft even learns about it. So if you find yourself infected with malware that your security software doesn't yet detect, exploiting a vulnerability that has not yet been fixed, the best approach is this. Restore your computer to a backup image taken before the infection. If you don't have a backup, try a system restore to a point prior to the infection. This isn't guaranteed, but depending on the specific malware involved, it could help. Check with your anti-malware tool vendor immediately. Update the tool's database and perform a full scan. Keep updating regularly. I recommend daily, which, fortunately, most security software now does by default. If you can, figure out what you did that allowed the malware onto your machine in the first place. If you can figure that out, don't do it again. And of course, take system updates regularly in the hopes that the vulnerability will be resolved quickly. Like I said, it's all about the race between the anti-malware tools, the hackers, and the software vendors. Occasionally, it's users like you and I who lose. For updates, for comments, for links related to this topic and more, visit askleo.com/3195. I'm Leo Notenboom, and this is askleo.com. Thanks for watching.